Join us on a journey into the future as we explore the concepts of the metaverse with a true evangelist. And while the idea of a seamless transition between the digital and physical environments might seem like science fiction, our guest explains how it could become a reality. We dive into the challenges that must be overcome, including the affordability and scalability of hardware and the development of unique skills required to produce high-quality 3D assets and interactive environments. Discover the exciting possibilities of the metaverse with us. I know you're going to love this episode with Meta Rick. Hello, tech friends, and thank you for tuning in to Emerging Technologies in Business, where we take a deep dive into different technologies that are impacting businesses today and in the very near future. I'm your host, Brock Riney, and this podcast is brought to you by ConcannonXR. Let's talk tech. Hey, everybody, welcome back for another episode. Today, I'm joined by Ricky Hawk of EngageXR, whose platform for virtual events and training are designed to create an immersive experience for participants. Ricky, honestly, man, thank you so much for being here today. How are you today?
Doing great. Excited to be here and chat about emerging tech and the future of VR.
Absolutely. So I think the first place where I want to begin, right? So I know you recently just joined EngageXR, and I know that you joined them because of the products that they supply, the people that are working there right now, and their focus on the enterprise space. But can you give our audience a bit of your background before joining EngageXR? And if you're able to share it with us, I don't know if you can or not because of privacy reasons, but any fun stuff that might be coming up in the future for EngageXR as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm really excited to be on the Engage team now. I had heard about them maybe about a year ago. I spoke at one of their events talking about the future trends in virtual events and immersive technology. And I was impressed by the team and how they hosted the event and the experience as a speaker. It was the first time I'd spoken in a fully immersive VR environment. I've done a bunch of these kind of panels and podcasts and whatnot, but that was a unique experience for me. I started VR gaming a couple years before that and had a decent amount of exposure to like Beat Saber and Superhot and some of these standard kind of really popular VR games. But then towards the end of last year, I got let go from the job I was at before, and I was kind of taking some time to, reset some habits, go on these long 5-mile walks, soak in the sunshine, read a bunch of books, and explore new opportunities. With that, Engage was one of those opportunities I started to explore, and they impressed me with the people, like you mentioned. They were founded by a couple in Ireland, David and Sandra Whelan, and they actually started back with the original Oculus SDK, and then shifted, or not SDK, but the original kind of hardware kit to start experimenting with the headset. They created a company called Lecture VR after a few big hits with like an Apollo 11 simulation and the Titanic down underwater. And they started really leaning into the future of immersive education. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago they discovered enterprise. So long-winded way of saying, but I think that their platform has had more time to evolve. They've had more time to like really think through the product and kind of develop more functionality. So it's not just jumping into a room with sticky notes and 3D pens, but there's actually a lot more rich features that you can use to do more than just a kind of basic conference room in a VR headset. As far as exciting stuff going on, I mean, we just, by the time this episode comes out, it might be a little bit older, but there's this Fatboy Slim concert that we just got done with. That was probably the most immersive VR experience I've ever had. Most of these concerts tend to be almost like more like a music video or kind of like consuming a piece of content. This is the first time that I've really felt like I was a part of the experience. It was a lot more intimate, and they did just a really good job with the production of it. To kind of show what's possible, and once you get a headset on and get out of the regular computer or mobile device.
So with Fatboy Slim being the topic, so check it out now for everybody back at home. Funk Soul Brother, for everyone that's just going to go check out some Fatboy Slim stuff. I think that's the coolest thing of all time. What's neat is our genre is completely changing realistically, right? So how we assume or consume concerts and things like that are completely different than what they've ever been before. And I think the thing I wanted to ask you is, I know you're a self-proclaimed Metaverse Evangelist, but I think I am too, right? I think it's just like, it's almost like a disease that you get over time. Once you really find like, I'm really in love with this, like you can't help yourself. So what I want to ask you is, what do you think is going to be one of the biggest challenges in creating a metaverse that's truly accessible and inclusive for everyone, regardless of their background or their resources, because not everybody has the chance to get an Oculus on their head? What do you think that biggest challenge is going to be to get that to be ubiquitous?
Yeah, so first on the Metaverse Evangelist thing, I think it's funny because I was playing around with like what do I want to use as my LinkedIn tagline or whatever, and
right.
I didn't want to say expert. I think there's a lot of like cheesy LinkedIn.
A lot of experts out there,
and even Metaverse Evangelist feels that way sometimes. I'm like, it's a little cheesy, but I think evangelist is the right word. Because it doesn't really exist yet, right? Like the metaverse is really more of this like philosophical idea of where immersive technology might bring us to, where we start to intersect how real a digital environment can feel versus a physical environment, and how can we make that a seamless transition? How do we get this open, interoperable set of virtual spaces and then integrate digital ownership and these other pieces to it? That's a future state. It's something that isn't here today. And so I figure the term evangelist is pretty good for describing like, hey, we're talking about how do we get there?
Yeah, for sure.
As far as the challenges of getting to that point, I mean, there's a few different categories of challenge, right? There's the hardware challenge. So getting hardware to a point where it's affordable enough, it's scalable enough to where you can actually get mass adoption of people being able to even tap into the experience in the first place, whether that be a full VR experience or an augmented reality experience. There's software limitations, so it still takes a lot of education and experience to be able to produce 3D assets and interactive environments with animations, and producing something that's really high production isn't something that's as easy as making like a Word document or a PowerPoint deck, right? There's still a lot of training and unique skills you need to develop for that. As far as how do we overcome those things, I think one factor is AI. What we're seeing with generative AI and prompt-driven generation of content, as that gets better, it's going to make it a lot easier for someone to have a vision and just produce and scale this stuff, make it real. And it's also going to make the weight on the hardware a little bit lighter. I think eventually if we can streamline file sizes and like our ability to create these things. The other piece is, shared perspectives globally, right? So like just because in America or in certain parts of the world where we can afford to invest in the cutting edge of a full VR experience, that doesn't mean that's true everywhere. And what's interesting that I've found speaking on a lot of these panels and a lot of these events is Africa is actually one of the biggest adopters of Metaverse and this idea of moving towards virtual worlds. There's a huge issue with traffic, being able to commute into bigger cities, and the wait time is gnarly. It's like way worse than anyone would complain about in LA or New York. And so the idea of remote work, the idea of access to opportunity is really, really top of mind for them. But they have something like 80% of their internet access is through mobile devices, and very, very little of it is through a desktop or let alone a headset. And the infrastructure for internet's not quite the same there either. And so we have this whole region of the world with millions of people that want to participate, and they have different blockers and different things they need to overcome than other parts of the world. So how do we strike a balance in the use cases we tap into, and how do we involve those perspectives? I think there's also that ethical component that is going to be something we have to overcome together.
For sure. I think that's something we're going to have to tackle long term, right? And I think a different way to look at it too, right, is that when you start thinking about the metaverse and we're sharing all of our social reactions and interactions and relationships in the future, do you think that the further that we get into the world of the metaverse, that it's going to bring us all closer together? Or do you think it's going to bring us further apart?
So this is interesting. So when Facebook did the big rebrand to Meta, a lot of folks immediately lashed back out against it, right? Where they're like, oh, I don't want this future world where we're all in virtual cubicles and a digital twin of an office space. And that sounds depressing. And like
sounds terrible.
we were all in a lockdown, right? Where we're like, I'm already at home all the time. I don't know if I want to be at home in a headset. But I don't think that's what the metaverse is. I think similar to online gaming and what we're already seeing with the internet, there's like 10% of society that'll probably live most of their life in that virtual world, in that immersive technology. There's another 10% on the other side that probably won't touch it at all. They're going to be the purists that live in nature and get their cabin in Montana or wherever and try and live out in the world, right? And they don't touch it. Right. But I think for the rest of us, most of us will be somewhere in the middle of that spectrum where we're already jumping on Zoom calls. We're already binging Netflix TV shows, the Squid Games, the Queen's Gambits of the world. Like, we already consume this content digitally. We're not talking about changing your life so drastically where you don't go outside anymore. We're talking about making those digital interactions you already have more valuable, more engaging, more interesting. And I think that will actually bring us closer together, not further apart.
I agree with that. I know at the same time, I do see there's ways that we're going to get further apart no matter what. But I really feel like it's flipping a coin, right? And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, as it's becoming more ubiquitous, right? So what are those concerns that you have, and just future looking, right, of the potential for VR to be have addiction, for privacy violations, or any other negative consequences that could come along with it, right? We know the good, but what's something that we should be worried about realistically?
Yeah, so I think I'm not so worried about the antisocial piece or the addiction piece of it. I think that stuff to me is really similar to, like, you know, when video games started having like team deathmatch and Call of Duty, and violence in games was what everyone blamed school shootings on and bullying in school. And what we've actually found through more studies and more time with the tech is that those games actually help kids have an outlet where it's actually really beneficial to their mental health and has no association whatsoever with violence in schools. Those problems actually stem from very, very different parts of these kids' lives than the video games. So I don't worry too much about that. But what I do worry about a little bit is, one, the implicit bias. We're building this entirely new virtual world that's going to be very impactful on our day-to-day lives. And if only certain perspectives are building that world, whether we intend any, you know, consequence towards another group of people or not, you're still going to have a bias that gets put into how you build that structure. And if that's the case, then you're going to end up preventing certain levels of access to other groups in other parts of the world. And I worry about that. That's why I think we need to lean into open sourcing and trying to make these worlds as open as possible, as inclusive as possible. Because if we do that early on, we'll avoid a lot of those biases in the building phase and create something that's a little bit more kind of welcoming. Because that's one of the biggest benefits of this technology, right? Is with AI translations, we're able to interact with other countries in different languages by not having geographic limitations. We can be in different parts of the world and share the same 3D space together. Like, there's such a beautiful thing about that. But in order for it to work, we need to build it together, not just build it in one region of the world or one group of people. So that's one of my bigger concerns, is really more that diversity of perspective in the building phase more than anything else.
Well, I think the metaverse well, we're definitely in our infancy stages right now. So we're still trying to figure out what's going to work and what's not. And I almost feel like AI has become the second coming of the internet right now, where everyone's going to throw everything at it to see what comes. And I think the metaverse is going to highly benefit from the rays of AI, right? Mm-hmm. With that being said, I think there's a few things that are in our past that may become, I don't know, archaic, realistically, is I guess the right way to say it, Ricky. So how do you think the metaverse is going to transform the entertainment industry? Do you think that things like media of movies and TV shows are just going to become obsolete? Or what do you think is the next front for that?
You know, I don't think that movies or television are going away. I think that there's still going to always be a certain want to consume content and just simply consume it and not really interact or engage with it. Same way we have video games and TV, right? Like, we have both for a reason. Now, will that consumption of content change over time? Sure. Like, we've already seen that change, right? Like, we had shifted from being just big blockbusters in movie theaters and then rental stores to now we had, mini series and 20-minute episodes that we could consume and binge online. And that's shifted even further with, TikToks and Instagram Reels and all these kind of bite-sized 10 to 60 second pieces of content. So I think that there's going to be one pathway of evolution there on like the type of content we consume and what that looks like. But then this growing sector of interactive content is going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We just saw a great example of it with Harry Potter, where Harry Potter's second most successful launch, including every one of the movies, is the most recent video game for Harry Potter Legacy or whatever. And it's got $850 million, I think, is the success on it. And that is amazing because you're giving a person an opportunity to be the character, to live in the story, to partake in that story, versus to simply watch and observe it. And this is something I think is my focus is really more on the business side of things, more than it is the consumer. And I was just talking to someone the other day where I think we could take that concept and repurpose that into employee onboarding. So if you think about, and I think this is a huge idea, we might start doing it at Engage, other companies might start doing it as well. But I love this idea of like, you have a brand that has a story to it. There's a founder that's usually looked at as this amazing historical figure. Like Gucci just had a movie made about the founding of Gucci, right? And that dramatic story. What if you took that story and you made it into a 15 to 20 minute video game for your employee to come play the character of the founder of your company and have to go through the founding story? And all of a sudden,
gamification just adds such a level of retention. Not even funny. Like gamification for people is so huge right now. I see it, man. Well,
and it's not just to retain the information, but it's to get more excited, right? Like companies in person, before we got to all this remote work stuff, like the joke was they're spending millions of dollars on avocado toast and pizza parties, and they think that's culture. They think that's going to improve morale with their employees, and we all kind of appreciate it, but not really. Versus every time I've ever seen someone put a VR headset on, they immediately get a childlike giggle and a smile, and they just have this sense of awe because it's a new and exciting and immersive experience. And I think that if you try to look at employee onboarding and recruitment of talent through that lens and try and lean into this type of technology, you'll find it's not as expensive as you think it is, and it's pretty impactful.
It really is. And I think one of the things that we got to be worried about in our world, because we haven't seen the adoption rates for Metaverse as we thought that we were going to over the last 1 to 2 years. Let's just be realistic. But that hurdle is going to get overtaken at some point. We know it's going to happen. So from your perspective, what do you think is one of the biggest hurdles in the term of scaling the Metaverse?
So I actually am not surprised by the slow growth. I think that when things get really hyped up, they get overblown a little bit and expectations rise. And I think those expectations were unrealistic to begin with. And I think they were also misassociated to other pieces of technology, right? So like a lot of people think Web3 is the Metaverse and Metaverse is Web3. Right. But in reality, like the blockchain is not a prerequisite to build a virtual interoperable environment. Now, a lot of people believe it's better because of the decentralization of the data that is a layer of the Metaverse, at least it can be. And I see valid points there, and I think that's a worthwhile conversation and a debate to have. But just because we're seeing like NFTs and monkey JPEGs take a little bit of a dip in their market doesn't necessarily mean that the Metaverse is taking the same level of a dip, right? So I think from a consumer perspective, it's going to take a lot of time. We need that hardware cost to really come down and make it a lot easier for people to try this stuff. Because I think right now they associate a headset as like a really expensive PS5 controller, and they're not seeing it much of a standalone system. And I think a lot of people were failed by the $20 Samsung Gearbox or whatever. Google and Samsung each dropped like a really affordable, like $25 headset back like maybe 6-7 years ago. And I think a lot of people see that and are like, oh, so if I pay $600 for a Meta Quest 2, is that what I'm getting? And it's not
totally different. Yeah.
So consumer adoption, I think that's going to take time. I think for the next 2 to 3 years, what we're going to see is a shift in perspective from businesses on the technology is here, the quality of the hardware, the quality of the software, the teams that are capable of delivering what they need from a software perspective, that's here now. So now it's just a matter of the shift in mindset of going like, okay, this is what I can actually use this for. And that education, and that's the next boom of Metaverse adoption we'll see is more on the business enterprise side of things.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. And, you know, I I know that you envision how this is going to go into the business world, and I completely agree. But how do you think once this does hit the consumer market, how is this going to impact our economy and the job market? Do you think it's going to create industries and opportunities, or do you think it's going to be more of a displacement of existing ones that we have right now?
I do. I'm a firm believer that if any technology gets adopted and starts moving towards like replacing anything, it's going to naturally create new jobs. Like, it's not very difficult for people to find new ways to use their time. And in fact, it reminds me of a conversation I had back in college with a couple of my best friends where we were talking about the statistics on what people dream about versus what they end up doing. And almost nobody dreams of being an accountant or a sales rep or a marketer. They might love it. They might end up doing it and might really feel fulfilled by that career. But as a child, that's very rarely what people dream of. They almost always dream of either being something like an astronaut or like some crazy heroic figure, or they dream of something creative, like a musician or a painter or some kind of art form. And I think what the metaverse allows is for more creative jobs. So it creates an environment where it really opens that door to creativity. And same thing with AI. I think that AI is shifting us away from tactical skills and into more creative, visionary skills. Like, how do you create a prompt? How do you take a vision in your head and develop it? Versus how do you tactfully put pieces together are two different things. And so I think with both immersive tech and with AI, we're actually moving in that direction where more creative skills are going to be the ones that are more valued.
It's the same thing with even like AI right now with ChatGPT-4, right? It's how clever can your prompt be? I think it's the same way with the XR space right now. It's how clever can you be with what you're trying to deliver at the time. I had one more question for you, Ricky, if you don't mind. And I always like to throw something in for a lighter note at the end of every episode. And for this one, I wanted to ask you if there was anything that was just crazy, unexpected, or surprising, or anything that you've experienced in the metaverse that just kind of, I don't know, threw you for a loop that wasn't normal, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it kind of ties into what you were saying before. I think that a lot of companies, when they go into the metaverse, they start by wanting to create digital twins of real life spaces of things people are familiar with. Right. Like, why do we have chairs? Like, if you go to a digital twin of a Microsoft store, why do we have chairs and tables in that store? It doesn't really make sense. But for now, it makes people feel more comfortable. And so that's something that surprised me, is that in the early phases of building these worlds, we kind of need to make some things that seem useless to help people feel more comfortable in the environment. But what I'm excited for is kind of the next phase as people get more comfortable. How do we remove physical limitations, the things that we can't do in real life, but we can do in this virtual world? What are those things? And I think there's a massive opportunity right now for people dabbling in the space to experiment and do a lot of things that won't work. But we'll end up finding some very new ways to engage with our employees, our customers, our investors, our friends. Like, we'll find this new form of environment to have those social interactions. And that's going to take some time to develop.
Really will. We're just not there yet. I think we're there very, very, very soon, though, to be honest with you, my friend.
Well, and stuff like this Fatboy Slim concert's a great example of it, right? Like, I was so pleasantly surprised. Like, I was excited about it. I think Fatboy Slim is an impactful artist on the whole house genre and electronic music. And I know that the entire company was really excited about it. As a new employee, I hadn't really experienced it. I was like, I don't know what this is going to be. My expectations were kind of mid-level, to be honest. And then I came out of it going, that might be the best VR experience I've ever had.
That's awesome.
Because of exactly that reason. With the creative direction, they really removed all the physical limitations. They're like, how do we teleport from one location to another in every song? How do we fly in the sky for a little while versus being in these like otherworldly type environments, incorporating roller coasters, like all these unique little things that you don't typically find in like a standard VR like conference room, for example.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. Ricky, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for telling us a little bit about engaging XR and yourself, of course. I really do appreciate it. If there's If our audience wanted to get connected with you or with EngageXR, is there anywhere that you would specifically like to point them?
Yeah, definitely. So I'd say for Engage, the website engagevr.io, great spot to learn more about the platform, about Athena, our AI, and just kind of some of the things we're dabbling with. You can check me out on LinkedIn. I've also got my own podcast, MetaRick, where we talk about emerging technologies, XR, AI, blockchain, all this sort of stuff. So LinkedIn and then the company website, I'd say, are the best spots to find us.
Awesome. We'll make sure to get that link in the bio as well for you. I also do want to take a quick second. First of all, thank you, Ricky. Really do appreciate you. But I do want to thank our sponsors as well, ConcannonXR. XR is the future. If you're working in the world of XR and you're looking to step into the future, ConcannonXR is here to help to bring your XR dreams into reality. So regardless if you're developing your own XR application or looking for a helping hand to take an idea to the next level, ConcannonXR is here to help. You can reach out to them at ConcannonXR by emailing them at inquiry@ConcannonXR.com. And of course, you can find our podcast on social media as well at ETIB Podcast. If you like this episode, subscribe and click on one of these other videos that are going to pop up here above your head for another emerging technologies and business video that comes out every Monday morning at 7 a.m. Central. I want to thank Ricky. Thank you so much for being here today, good sir, and thanks for sharing your story with us and our audience. For everybody at home, that's going to do it for today. I've been your host, Brock Riney, and we're going to talk some more emerging tech next time. Hope everybody's having a great day.